This is Jill Florent, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Amazon QuickSight Fall Learning Series, where every week from late September to mid-November, we're doing in-depth virtual workshops where you can connect with our subject matter experts on Amazon QuickSight to go deep in your learning, either about the author experience, the admin experience, or the developer experience. Today, we're going to be focusing in on anonymous embedding with RLS, and this is focused on the developer persona. So today, you're going to learn how to embed QuickSight dashboards for anonymous access. And we've had this capability now for a little while. We have new APIs and new capabilities related to RLS that we'll be diving deep on today. The people who should ideally be here, I just want to make sure you're in the right place. You should be a developer with some prior experience authoring in QuickSight or having attended and watched some of our learning activities around authoring. And you should have an AWS account with admin privileges, a QuickSight Enterprise account, and a basic understanding of JavaScript and Python. We will be trying to answer as many questions today as possible. One of the benefits of joining us live is that we do have subject matter experts on the line who are moderating questions during the time together. We also do have a QuickSight community that's a great place to connect after the session for posting questions and getting answers from other colleagues around the world. Just to note that we will be adding some new enhancements to the community in the weeks ahead, so stay tuned. We also are recording the session today, and we'll share this on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. It's probably a good thing to subscribe to the YouTube channel because we're constantly posting either short how-to videos or, in the case of the learning series, these more in-depth hands-on experiences. For today's workshop, there are a few content links that we'll be sharing. You might want to make a note of these here or come back to this when we're going through the hands-on activities. And with that, I will turn it over to our session leader, Arun Santosh, Senior Solutions Architect for Amazon QuickSight.
Thanks, Jill. We will dive right into the content then. So today we'll be talking about anonymous embedding with QuickSight. Like Jill mentioned, we will cover the new APIs that were released, as well as an exciting new feature, row-level security with anonymous embedding. So let's move forward on this. And what we have in the agenda today is first we will take a look at the API, get to know that. Then we will walk through the architecture of what we are going to build today. And we will be building two modes, both to simulate a static web page load as well as a dynamic web page load. And then we will actually build that out in this session, and then play with RLS in the mix as well. So the new API that we have for anonymous embedding is generate embed URL for anonymous user. And in the simplest form, the way we use it is AWS QuickSight, generate embed URL for anonymous user. We pass in the AWS account ID. I have that coded as a variable here, but the actual value goes. And then we provide the namespace. Now you might be wondering, namespace is a construct that's more related to users and groups for multi-tenancy user isolation. Why is that factoring in anonymous embed URL generation API? Where this comes in handy is you might still be using this in a multi-tenant setup. It could be an enterprise account wherein you have set up separate namespaces for different departments. Or it could be an ISV wherein you're having separate namespaces for different end customers. And you might have a need to use anonymous embedding for those departments or customers. And along with that, you want to track the usage back to those entities. Now, since there is no user context, you can't track it by user, but having the namespace in here lets you tag each and every embed URL that's being generated back to that namespace for billing purposes. And it will show up in the cost and usage report under resource ARNs. Now, next on the attribute list here is authorized resource ARNs. You can specify whichever dashboards you want to package into that single URL. So let's say you have 5 different dashboards that you want to show and letting the user flip between those 5. Rather than having to generate embed URLs for each and every one of those 5, as and when the user is clicking on a new button or a drop down in your parent application, you can code all of that into this authorized resource ARNs. Like here I have one valid ID and one dummy ARN provided. You could have those 5 there. And then as part of the experience configuration, you could say dashboard equal to the initial dashboard ID, which you want to display when the link is initially redeemed in the client side. Okay, so we will see this in action straight away. So let's flip over to a terminal here. And I have this command ready to go here. Copy that over, paste that into my AWS CLI. And this is just to show you how simple it is, right? This is doing it manually, but in the rest of the workshop, we will build a framework around it. But the gist of it is this API, when it's run, gives out an embed URL, which can be redeemed. Now, we will see that in action as well. Add one more desktop here and bring in a private browser. So I have a private browser here. Let's copy this embed URL and we will try to redeem it. Having a little trouble with my mouse today, but we should be good. Okay. So you can see that embed URL which I generated, I just put it into a private browser and it gave me that dashboard. I didn't have to authenticate at all. So that's anonymous embedding, the basics of anonymous embedding for you here. Now let's get into the meat of it. We saw the API, we saw how the API works. So let's see the architecture that we are going to build today. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are having 2 modes. We will see how we can set up a static web page as well as a dynamic web page. And in here, in the components we are building today, we are using minimal set just for the ease of the workshop and just for ease of you experimenting with this. So we are using API gateway backed by Lambda to act as a web server. When you're doing this on your own, in your production application, you could use your own static web server, whatever that may be. Maybe S3 paired with CloudFront or any other mechanism that you're using. So in this workshop, the user will make a call to an API gateway URL that will in turn invoke a Lambda function. The Lambda function is going to return a static HTML content, which would get loaded onto the client browser. And once that's loaded, there is scripts provided therein, which will turn back and call API gateway again, this time requesting for an embed URL. So initially, whatever was loaded was pure static content, right? Just the HTML page and script. Now that script is executing and it's asking for an embed URL. API gateway will again invoke Lambda. Lambda will work with QuickSight to get that URL generated, the API that I just showed ahead of getting into this. And once that URL is available, it's sent back via API gateway to the client side, and our front-end library will take that embed URL and embed that into a div that's allocated on that static page. And I also have the identity and access management section here just to call out that we do have to set up the policies to allow Lambda to make the QuickSight call. And since we are making a call to generate an anonymous access URL, in the policy, we can specify which all dashboards we want to allow to be exposed this way. So that completes the static flow. Now we can make it a little bit more simpler in the dynamic flow. We are going to use the same components. And what this showed here was the last part that I mentioned about the URL being embedded into that div and the content being pulled from QuickSight and the dashboard being displayed. Now onto the dynamic web page. Herein we will use the same set of components, but the client is going to call API gateway. API gateway will invoke Lambda, and Lambda will straight away go make that request to Amazon QuickSight, generate the embed URL, and it will replace the HTML content we have there within Lambda. It will replace the placeholders for that URL. So it packs in that embed URL into the HTML itself, and that dynamic HTML is now returned via API gateway to the client browser, and therein it gets embedded into the div by our front-end JavaScript library. And once that's done, the content is pulled from QuickSight and the dashboard comes up. So this is what we will build today in our hands-on workshop. So we'll get into the hands-on workshop next. So for that, I'll first drop this link into chat. I'm giving you the link to author workshop. This is not the workshop we are going to be running today, but I'm giving this link so that you can download the SaaS sales.csv file. So go ahead and do that first. From the page that loads from the link, click on this download SaaS sales.csv, and we will use that in a subsequent step to upload into QuickSight and create a couple of quick dashboards from it. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Then the actual workshop we are going to use today is the link I'm putting in now, our anonymous embedding workshop. So in here, first let's start with the prerequisites. Like Jill mentioned, you need an AWS account with admin rights or at least elevated rights, which lets you create Lambda, roles and policies, API gateway, and QuickSight. Basic knowledge of Java and JavaScript and Python is good, but even if you do not know that, we are providing all the code here, so you should be able to follow along. Your QuickSight needs to be set up in Enterprise Edition, and it should have session capacity pricing enabled on it. And I'll walk you through those steps. So let's copy this notes template where it says embedding notes template. Let's copy that and let's paste it into a notepad. And this step might seem trivial, but I highly encourage you to do this because it makes our life easier as we go through building this and getting to launch that site. So it's having some sample values. Let's get rid of those sample values. The dashboard list, it's just giving you an idea of how it should be pasted in. So the dashboard ID is generated from QuickSight. You want to paste it, comma, delimited, no spaces in between. and then name list, how you want that to show up in your application dropdown. Again, comma delimited without spaces in between, but you can have spaces within your names as such. The region where you are setting up the dashboard, and then this is AWS data path is going to be used in the Lambda configuration environment variables, just because we are packaging in a local model of QuickSight. Lambda's Bodo 3 doesn't have the generate embed URL for anonymous user quite yet. It's a slightly delayed release cycle that Lambda follows for Bodo 3. So let's blow away these sample values here and retain the entries for list, name list, region, and be sure to keep saving this list as you go along. Okay. Now, with that done, let's get into AWS Management Console for an account wherein you have admin or elevated privileges. I'm going to start off by setting up QuickSight. I haven't set up my QuickSight account on this AWS account, so I'm searching for QuickSight from the services menu and launching QuickSight. I get the option to sign up for QuickSight, so click on that. And in here, I get the choice between Enterprise and Enterprise plus Q. Q is our new natural language query offering. It's very useful if you're interested in checking out natural language query. For today's purposes, since this is focused on purely anonymous embedding, I'm going to just go ahead with the Enterprise version. Scroll down and click Continue. And in here, I have 3 authentication methods available. I could use IAM federated identities along with QuickSight managed users, just IAM federated identities, or choose to plug in Active Directory. I'm going to go with the default. It's using IAM federated identities and QuickSight managed users. I can make a region selection here. By default, it's populated with North Virginia. There are a couple of implications on that this region selection drives. So if you're adding users to your QuickSight account, every author that you add comes with 10 GB of free spice capacity. That's QuickSight's internal data storage. So all that spice capacity goes to the region that you select here. Let's say you added 10 authors, you have 100 GB of spice. So you got to make sure that you are selecting the region where your data workloads are, because you don't want your free spice to be sitting out there in a different region and then end up having to purchase spice in the region where your data workloads are. It also drives the place where your identities will be managed, your users and groups, the identity region that QuickSight uses. It doesn't need to be the one that you select here, but QuickSight will internally determine what's the best region to manage identities for the selection you're making here. Now for North Virginia, it's going to be managed in the same region. And then it also drives the default region where your users will be dropped into when they come in through the console. Okay. You have to give an account name. Now this is something which lives through the life of your QuickSight account. So choose a name that's meaningful to your entire organization. I'm going to go with QSWS. Since this is a QuickSight workshop I'm running, I'm using my email handle without the @ and since I do this day in, day out, I'm going to also put in today's date just to dedupe. And then notification email, plug in your official email ID there. And rest of the selections can be left at default. Click on finish. So that will take a few seconds, about 15 to 20 seconds to set up the QuickSight account. Meanwhile, let's open up another tab here on the same browser, and you can just type in console.awsamazon.com, and it will bring you to the management console again. And I'm just keeping that ready. Flipping back to my QuickSight account tab, I see my account setup is done. So clicking on Go to Amazon QuickSight, and it will take me to my QuickSight account. Sets a few samples for me, and then I'm good to go. So here, the first thing I'm going to do is go into Management Console for QuickSight. That's by clicking on this username on the top right, and from the drop-down, select Manage QuickSight. And therein, I will go into your subscriptions from left panel and choose the session capacity pricing. I'll choose the monthly subscription pack for this trial and confirm that subscription. Now I'm good to go. It says that's subscribed. You can see that I have the current plan set to monthly starter, 500 sessions. This is needed for anonymous embedding. Okay. So with that done, let's click the QuickSight icon top left to come back to the QuickSight console. And in here, let's start off by creating a data set. So from the left panel, click on Data Sets. And therein we have the button which gives us the option to create a new data set. So go ahead and click that. And we will choose to upload a file. I had given out the link to the author workshop earlier to download the sales.csv. If any of you folks are joining late, that's available in the same link as the Anonymous Embedding Workshop, author workshop, and the first page will give you the link for sales.csv. So I'll select this and choose to open that file. And it gives me a file upload setting confirmation dialog with a little bit of data preview. I could get into more detailed data prep by going into edit settings and prepare data. But for today's session, I'm going to just click next and go directly into visualizing. Okay. So on the next pop-up that comes up, there is a visualize button. Click on that. And I'm dropped into the analysis build interface. Now, this is an advanced workshop session, so I'm not going to touch upon much about how to build an analysis and the good practices therein and such. It's expected that you folks already have covered that and you're now getting into the advanced. There are other webinars available wherein we take you through authoring in detail, and you could also find those recorded on our YouTube channel. For today's purpose, let's keep it simple. I'm going to just add a quick title to this dashboard. So from top right, I'm clicking on that plus add and choosing to add title. I'm going to call this my dashboard 1. And then in the autograph visual that's available here, I'm going to select sales and region. So it gave me a bar chart showing sales by region. Let's quickly duplicate this visual. From the visual menu, I'm choosing to duplicate this visual. And on that second visual, I'm also going to add product into the mix. So click on product from the left panel, and it gave me a clustered bar chart. I like to see this as a stacked bar. So from the visual types, I'll just change this to a horizontal stacked bar. And the color scheme looks a little pale to me, so I'll quickly change the theme as well and apply seaside theme here. That's better. Now I will go ahead and publish this dashboard, this analysis out as a dashboard. So for that, From top right, I have this share option. Click on that and choose Publish Dashboard. In here, I'm going to give it a name as Dashboard 1 and publish this. So notice that when I published it, it gives me a model to share this with other users. We are going to use this for our anonymous embedding, so I'm going to just close out of this, not sharing it explicitly with anyone. But what's important here is in the URL, there is the dashboard ID available. So where it says dashboard slash, this UID is the dashboard ID. So let's copy that and we will paste that into our embedding notes and save that. Now return back to QuickSight and let's click on the QuickSight icon top left to exit this dashboard view. And we are back at our analysis view, and sales.csv analysis is the one from which we had just now published this dashboard. So let's click on that to open it again. And we will just change this title to dashboard 2. And let's change the theme as well. We'll change the theme to midnight so that we can easily distinguish between these two dashboards. Now, publish this out again. So share, publish dashboard, and we will call this, rather than replacing the existing one, we will publish this as a new dashboard. And I'm going to call this as dashboard 2 and publish this. And I'll just close the share dialog. I'll copy the dashboard ID of dashboard 2 and paste that into my notepad. The name list I'm going to say is dashboard 1, dashboard 2. And the region where I deployed the dashboard, that shows up. I hadn't changed my region, so I was dropped into the default US East one, and that shows up as part of the URL as well. Right? It shows here US East one. So I'm going to type that in here into my notepad, US East 1, and I'll save this. Okay. So we have done the initial prep work. So we set up the QuickSight account, we set up a couple of dashboards we can embed. So we can now get into the embedding workflow and the framework, building out the framework. So you can refer the workshop link which I provided earlier. The first thing we are going to build here is the Lambda execution role. Okay, so for that, the management console tab we had opened earlier, let's search for IAM from there and choose the IAM service. And once that loads up, let's choose to create a policy. So from the left panel, let's select policies and choose this create policy button on the right, top right, click create policy. And in here, let's use JSON instead of Visual Editor. So there are two tabs, Visual Editor and JSON. Click on JSON. Let's remove the empty statement that's given there. Just delete all of that. Then go back to the workshop page. And in step 2, under Lambda execution role, there is a JSON block given. So copy that policy and paste that into this JSON editor here. And we can see that the permissions being granted is for QuickSight generate embed URL for anonymous user. We are allowing the resource default namespace. So like I mentioned, this is for billing, so you have to specify which all namespace you are supposed to tag these sessions against. In our case, we will just stick with the default namespace. So that's already given here. And then you will notice that there are two dashboard ARNs provided, but with these placeholders, dashboard ID, dashboard 1 ID and dashboard 2 ID. So let's replace that. Let's go back to the notepad and let's copy the dashboard IDs and paste that in here. And paste over these placeholders. Be sure to get rid of that comma we had in there. So the final state should look like this: 2 dashboard ARNs along with the namespace ARN there. And then the bottom section is just to allow for logging, just for Lambda to be able to log it. So with this done, let's click on Next Tags button and Next Review. And we will call this our QS Anonymous Embed Policy. So you can copy that name from the workshop, calling this QS Anonymous Embed Policy. And with that, create the policy. I'll wait a few seconds for folks to catch up with me. Okay, now next we will create a role. So again, from the same IAM console, from left panel, you could click on roles and choose to create this role. Create role button is available top right. And therein, we want to select a role that would work with our Lambda function, which we'll be creating in the next step. So let's choose AWS service as the trusted entity. And from the choose a use case section, let's choose Lambda and then click on next permissions. And in here, we can search for the policy which we just created in the prior step. So just start searching for QS Anonymous. And once that policy comes up, check the box against it and click on Next Tags button and Next Review. We got to give this a name and we will call it our QS Anonymous Embed role. If you want to just copy the name from the workshop, that's available under step 5. QS Anonymous Embed role is what I'm going to call this. And with that, let's click Create Role. And you'll see that the role has been created. If you search for it, you'll see the role show up in the role list as well. Okay, so that finishes the first step in the framework. We have created the policy and the role. Now let's move on and create a Lambda function. So this is our compute layer. For folks who are not familiar with Lambda, Lambda lets you just upload code and you don't have to worry about the infrastructure to run the code on, worry about managed servers. Lambda would just run the code as and when you need it. Right? So it's pretty useful. So let's do that. For that, from our AWS Management Console, let's search for Lambda and pick Lambda from Services. Then here, if you haven't created anything, it will come up blank. Just choose the Create Function button from top right. Once you're on the Create Function page, leave the default author from scratch option. Keep that selected. And for the function name, we will call this our Anonymous Embed Sample, QS Anonymous Embed Sample. And you can copy that from the workshop as well. So under Web Content Lambda, step 1, the name is provided. QS Anonymous Embed Sample is what I'm calling this. The runtime, we want to change that to Python 3.8. The architecture, you can leave it at the default 86, 64. And then under change default execution role, under permissions, click that twisty and choose the option to use an existing role. Once you do that, you will get the choice box to select from existing roles. And you should see the QS anonymous embed role, which we created in last step. So go ahead and select that. So just repeating those steps, the function name I gave as QS anonymous embed sample, runtime is Python 3.8, architecture is the default value, x86, and under permissions, I changed it to use an existing role and chose QS anonymous embed role. With those settings done, let's click on create function button. And that will bring us to the Lambda function page. And there is a simple Lambda starter block given here. Now flip back to the workshop page, and therein under second step, there is an option to download a Lambda package. So go ahead and download that file to your local. It'll give you a few seconds to do that. And now that you have that file on your local, let's upload that into Lambda. So back on the Lambda function page, there is this option, this button upload from. Click on that. It will give you a drop down. Therein you can select .zip file option. And on that dialog that comes up, click the upload button and choose the QS anonymous embed sample.zip, which you downloaded from the workshop page. And open that, followed by clicking on save. So you'll see that it loads a couple of folders, a couple of files here. We'll do a code walkthrough later on, but we'll just point out that this is just sample code being provided to get you familiarized with anonymous embedding. And then when you're setting up for your own production purposes, be sure to tweak it to match your needs. Now, this done, let's also go into the configuration section. So from the top set of options, we were in the code section, select configuration, and therein the general configuration panel opens up. The default timeout value is 3 seconds for Lambda. Let's increase that. Let's give it the full 30 seconds that API gateway will wait for it to return with values. We don't need that much time, but I'm just setting it at the max of 30 seconds that API gateway allows. And click save. You'll see that that value stuck. So it's 30 seconds now. So that's pretty much on the setting up of the accounts. Oh yeah, one more step. We have to set up the environment variables. So let's set that up next. So from the configuration panel itself, choose environment variables from left panel and click edit. In here, click the add environment variable button. And you can see the environment variables provided under step 5 of Web Content Lambda. These you will recognize are the same values that we had in our notepad. So let's create those environment variables, starting with dashboard ID list. I'll just get that list from my notepad and paste that in here. Add another. This time it's my dashboard name list. And get that. And add my dashboard region. copied it over in single set, and then I'll get rid of the colon. And the last one is AWS data path. And we give it a value, the dot or period character. What this is used for is to tell Lambda to look in the current directory for a service which we are calling Bodo3 service. When we are creating a client for QuickSight, we say Bodo3.client QuickSight. So rather than looking at Lambda's version of Bodo3, look in the current folder to see if there is a service model file provided or not. If that's available there, use the local version, is what we are telling Lambda to do here. So with these 4 set up, let's click on save. We can see that those environment variables have been correctly set. Now, flipping back to the code. So this is what I was referring to. We have packaged in QuickSight model into this folder. So by AWS data path of dot, QuickSight model from this will be picked up by Lambda. Now the next step for us is to create an API gateway to invoke this Lambda. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll leave the Lambda code open here. We'll come back to that later. We'll walk through that code, and then we'll actually tweak some of those code as well in later part of this session. So for now, let's open a new tab and again go to console awsamazon.com. So we are logged into that same account. Be sure your region is showing up the same as well. And in here, from the services search box, search for API gateway and choose API gateway from services listing. Now this view that you initially get might be slightly different depending on whether you have other API gateway set up already or it's the very first time. But either way, what I want you to be doing is build a new REST API. So there are these 4 choices. Choose to build a new REST API. And since this is my first API in this account, it gives me a welcome message. I'll just click OK on it. And it gives me a slightly different form as well with an example API. So if you do get a screen like this, choose new API option instead. And then we want to give this a name. Let's use the name as provided in the workshop. So we are going with QS anonymous embed sample. You'll notice the pattern there. We are calling all the entities the same. That's just to make sure that we know later that all this works with this anonymous embedding sample that we are building here. So QS anonymous embed sample as the API name. The rest of the values we can leave. So protocol is REST, new API, API name, QS anonymous embed sample. With that, click the create API button. And you will be dropped into this API configuration screen. Herein in the center panel, there is this actions button. Go ahead and click on that and it will give you a drop down. From there, choose to create a resource. And for resource name, let's choose the name as given in the workshop. So anonymous-embed-sample. That's given in step 3 of the workshop. So let's paste that in. Anonymous-embed-sample. The resource path will be automatically populated. That's fine. We do not want to make any other changes, so the checkboxes for proxy resource and API gateway cores, you can leave those as is, unchecked, and then go ahead and click create resource. So that will create a resource in this center panel, and you can see it. It's called anonymous embed sample, the name we provided, and that's highlighted as well. With that highlight in place, let's click Actions button again and pick the Create Method option there. So you can see it creates a drop-down box here under Anonymous Embed Sample. Go ahead and click on that drop-down, and you'll see multiple options there. So from that, choose the Get option. And with Get selected, click the small tick mark icon to the right of it. So it will set up your Get method here to the right, and we can now configure that. The integration type, let's leave it at Lambda function, because we want this API gateway to invoke the Lambda which we created in the last step. So leave that at Lambda function. There is this checkbox against use Lambda proxy integration. Be sure to check that. This is important because what we are telling API gateway is just to pass the event and context entities to and make that available to Lambda, so that Lambda can get all those information out of it, like any query string parameters being passed and such. We can access all of that from the Lambda layer then. Lambda region, be sure to pick the region where you created the Lambda function. In my case, it's US East 1. And under Lambda function, I'll start searching for QS. As I type QS, I get the type ahead for QS Anonymous Embed Sample. That's the Lambda function we created. So I'm picking that. So rest of the values stays the same. So I'll just go through those selections once more. Integration type, I selected Lambda function. Lambda proxy integration, I enabled it. Lambda region, I selected my region where I created my Lambda function, and then I searched and selected the QS Anonymous Embed Lambda function from the Lambda function search box. With those done, let's click the Save button. And I get a dialog asking me to confirm that we want to allow this API gateway to invoke the Lambda. So let's go ahead and click OK. We want to allow that. So that's done. And we have set up that method, and it can invoke the Lambda function, and it can pass the responses back now. We haven't quite deployed this yet, though. We have to deploy this out. So from the center panel, click on the top resource node, and then click on Actions and choose Deploy API. Under Deployment Stage, choose New Stage. And for stage name, you can use Test. Just confirming that that's what we advise in the workshop as well. Yes, under step 6, it's given that we want to use the stage name as test, but depending on when you're doing this in your production or dev, you might have different stage names. Purposes of this workshop, we will use test. With that, let's click on deploy. And now we are able to get that. If you see on the left panel, the stages section has been automatically selected once you deployed it, and the center panel is now showing stages. And if you expand that test stage, which we just now created, and click on that get method, you will see a full invoke URL here. Okay, so this invoke URL is what we will need to allow list this URL in QuickSight, and then try launching this static and dynamic versions of this web page as well. But before we go into that, let me quickly show you how we could test this as well. So flipping back to resources from left panel, let's click on that get method. And on the right panel, you'll now see a test option. So if you go ahead and click test, there is an option to provide query strings, headers and such. Leave all of that blank and just click test. And you should see an HTML body come up as the response body, right? Now what's happening is when we don't pass in any query string, it's going to default to that static web page flow that I initially talked about. So it's going to give back static HTML, which when loaded onto the browser would invoke the subsequent calls to get the embed URL and such. We can test the dynamic flow as well from here. So if I enter the query string value as mode equal to dynamic, I believe this is all in lowercase, and click test. This response doesn't quite look right. It mostly got to do with the mode value I entered. We will confirm the accurate value to be used when we are doing the Lambda code walkthrough, and we will try this again at that point. For now, let's keep moving. The next thing we want to do is click on stages, and let's go back to that get invoke URL. So from stages, let's click on expanding that test stage and click on the get method there and copy this full invoke URL. We'll do a couple of things with this. We are not quite ready to test this out yet. So with this copied to our clipboard, let's flip back to the QuickSight tab in our browser and go into Manage QuickSight screen. And in here from left panel, let's click on Domains and Embedding and paste this URL here. Keep in mind, we are pasting the full URL, but then get rid of the /test/anonymous embed sample part. So it just needs to be the first API gateway URL part, not the full resource part there. With that pasted in, click add. So this will allow list this particular URL, and now this URL will be able to embed QuickSight dashboards, and that content can show. If we do not do this step, and if we try to go ahead with the embedding, it's going to give a course error because that's a domain which we haven't allowed listed from QuickSight. So this is an important step. And keep in mind that this setting is region specific. So when you're, let's say you did this for US East 1 today, and then tomorrow you come back and build a dashboard in the US East 2, and you are trying to embed that into the same parent site, you have to actually go into US East 2, launch admin panel, and then repeat this step. Because otherwise you're going to get a course error because you haven't explicitly allowed that domain from US East 2. So keep that in mind if you're embedding dashboards from different regions. Okay, so that's done. Now, I believe we are in good shape to test this. Let's open up, in fact, let me get rid of this older private window. I will launch a new Chrome window here. Bring that over. And let's paste the full invoke URL. So it's launching dashboard 1 for me. And if you remember, that's the one where we had used the Seaside theme. And then we had another one, dashboard 2, with Midnight theme, right? So you can see that both of those dashboards are available to me here to pick from, and I can easily flip back and forth. I was not asked for any sort of authentication, so it's in true anonymous mode that this is working. So on the fly, it generated an embed URL that's authorizing both these URLs, and by default, it launched that dashboard 1. And then when I make this choice here between dashboard 1 and 2, it's calling a front-end function, navigate to dashboard, and it's just flipping between those dashboard IDs. So there is no backend call needed for it. There is no need to create a new embed URL. Using that initial embed URL that was generated, we are able to flip back and forth between the authorized dashboards. Okay. And now if we want to also look at the static flow, mode equal to static, I can put that in there and it will force the static flow. In fact, I think the default was dynamic and this forces the static flow. And we will confirm that as we go into the code layer. That's what we'll do next. We'll do a code walkthrough. So for that, let's come back to that Lambda function. And for folks who are eagerly waiting for the RLS part of it, that's coming soon after. As soon as we do this code walkthrough, I'll get into that. We still have ample time. I'm pretty sure we will be able to finish ahead of time today. So let's walk through this code. So in here, as part of, let's look at the left panel first. We have this lambda function.py, that's what's opened up here. And I mentioned earlier that there's the QuickSight model file packaged here. This is because the generate embed URL for anonymous user is not quite available in Lambda's border version yet. So once that's available, you don't need this to be packaged in. Then under content, you will see that there is a dynamic sample.html and static sample.html. These are HTML files with some placeholders in there, and we will be replacing those placeholders from this Lambda layer and giving out that HTML content back to the client. So we are doing it this way just to mimic the function of a web server, both static and dynamic, with minimal set of components, just for the ease of setting up this workshop and ease of playing around with this. Okay. Now, within this Lambda function, let's see what's happening. The first part of it, we are defining a function which is going to get QuickSight dashboard URL, and that's being passed in an account ID, the dashboard ID list, and the region. And we create a QuickSight client with that, specific to that dashboard region. We generate a dashboard ARN list from the list of dashboard IDs. The format is standard for that. It's ARN QuickSight, the dashboard region, the account region, followed by dashboard/dashboard ID. So we use list comprehension here to do that, generate that dashboard ARN list. And then we are making this call to generate embed URL for anonymous user. Like I mentioned earlier, the similar set of values here, passing in the account ID, the namespace for billing purposes, the experience configuration. I'm just passing the initial dashboard ID as the first dashboard in that list. So that's why it opened up with dashboard 1 when we launched our site. And under authorized resource ARNs, the dashboard ARN list. So that's the 2 dashboard ARNs for our dashboard 1 and dashboard 2, and how long we want this session to be active. That's packaged in here as well. Now in the main part of the program that's beginning from here, we are getting the AWS account ID first. We take that from the Lambda functions ARN, and then from the environment variables. Remember, we set up the dashboard ID list, dashboard name list, dashboard region, all of that as environment variables. We are reading all of that in. And then we are choosing the mode. So in fact, like I mentioned, the mode was in fact dynamic by default. So we are defaulting that to dynamic. And then if mode is passed in, it can be one of 2 values, so static and get URL. And then if it's static, we set it to that, or if it's get URL, we set it to that, right? And anything else is unsupported value. So that's probably why the API gateway, the final test I ran, it looked a little bit odd to me, but yeah, let's go back here. And if I wanted to test this again, so I should have done mode equal to static, right? And that gives me the URL for static HTML. If I didn't do anything, then that gives me the code for dynamic. And if I give mode equal to get URL, I believe I am typing that correct case, then it should give me the embed URL. Okay. So then the next part of it is, if mode is dynamic, we are opening this dynamic sample.html. Let's look at this file, content/dynamic sample.html. So this has a minimal HTML file. It's including our JavaScript library, front-end library here. It's including jQuery, Bootstrap, and such. And then the core of it is here, right? We are having this dashboard ID list, the name list, index, and so on. You can see these are placeholders. Right? So we'll fill this from Lambda. And then when we also have a QS embed URL into this embed dashboard function. This will also be filled by Lambda ahead of sending this HTML back to the front-end client. Right? So herein, the function embed dashboard embed URL is defined, and that calls QuickSight embedding embed dashboard. Therein we are giving a container name, the width, height, whether to enable print, undo, redo, and so on. And then under the body, we are having the header, the option to select the dashboard names, and we have this dashboard container, which is a simple div. When this page loads, this script is going to call this embed dashboard function, and that's going to embed the link that's dynamically embedded in here into that div, which we identified in the body. Okay, so that's what's happening. If we go back and look at the dynamic mode here. Oh, sorry, I'm making the same mistake. I shouldn't specify any mode there. So it will come back with the dynamic mode, and we will see that the in place of that placeholder, it's having the actual URL, right? This is what goes back to the client and brings up the dynamic website. Now, when we are doing this in static mode, let's see here in the static mode, we will take a different, one moment. I skipped ahead of something here. Right. Okay, so the static mode part here, we are referencing the static sample.html, right? And in here, again, we will replace some of the content. The static sample.html, you'll see it's structured pretty much similarly, but it also has an API gateway URL with the mode set to get URL. And herein, instead of hard coding the embed URL, we are making this call when the document load is complete, called API gateway generate embed URL. And that function is going to make an AJAX request to the API gateway URL that we mentioned here with the mode as get URL, right? So it makes that AJAX request, it gets back the embed URL, and it in turn then invokes the embed dashboard with result.embed URL. So there it's first getting the static HTML to load, the script runs, it makes subsequent call, gets the embed URL, and that gets embedded. So that's the flow. Okay, the rest of the page is pretty much similar. Now, for the interesting part, right? Let's get into, all this is good. We are doing this with anonymous context, but how do we do row-level security with anonymous users? Right? Let's get into that. And let's also look at what scenarios that might be useful in, right? So let's say you are doing this for an enterprise and you want to embed some content which only your HR department can access, and some other content which maybe only IT can access. But you don't necessarily care who from HR accesses that dashboard or who from IT accesses that IT dashboard. You're going to show the same, right? The info varies based on whether it's HR accessing it or IT accessing it. So you might have the user context from your SSO, which tells you that user 1 is from HR and user 2 is from IT. So using that information, you can have the same dashboard present different views to these two users. That way you don't have to register all of your users into QuickSight if you don't want to do that, but still you're able to serve out different views of the same dashboard. Or if you're having a public-facing dashboard and you want to, that's embedded in your public-facing website, and based on which geographic region a particular user is logging in from or connecting from, you want to show them different region-specific information on the dashboard. You could potentially utilize the IP information and track where the user is coming from, where the request is coming from. Is it from US or Canada or Asia Pacific? And then use that to filter out data and show them the relevant information. So those are some pretty interesting use cases where RLS with anonymous context adds a lot of value. Because in a public-facing setup, you don't need to register any of those users, or for an ISV with hundreds of thousands of users, and that too, the user population changing very fast, you don't have to worry about registering and maintaining all those users into QuickSight. You could just use anonymous embedding and set the correct security context. So let's see how to do that. So let's flip back to our QuickSight tab and click on QuickSight icon to get into our regular view. And from therein, from the left panel, let's select data sets. So you will see the SaaS sales.csv file, which we created at the beginning of this workshop. We had created both of those dashboards from it, but we had clicked on that next visualize option, so we hadn't seen this object, dataset object quite yet, but this is what that data was sourced from. So select that SaaS sales.csv, just click on that and it will give you the dataset menu. And therein you have this row level security button. So go ahead and click on that. You'll see there are two modes here. There is user-based rules that you can set up for your registered users, and there is tag-based rules you can set up for your anonymous users. And I'm going to set up tag-based rules here, but keep in mind that as soon as I do this, that will kick in, and then if I want to go back to that analysis and look at those two charts, I myself wouldn't be able to see that data till I allow my named registered user access to the full data set by specifying a user-based rule data set. So just calling it out there, we are not going to do that part today in this workshop, but in case you're setting the tag-based rules along with me and then come back and look at the analysis and see empty visuals, I don't want you to be stumped as to what happened. So that's why I'm calling that out. So open this tag-based rule section, just click on it, it will open up. And herein, you have this option to select a column. So let's select the region column there first. And there is this box where we can enter a tag key, right? So let's call this our region key. The exact same column name with a key added at the end, no spaces, and I have it as init caps, so R caps, K caps. And delimiter, I can choose one of the existing values, or I can type in my own delimiter as well. So we had regions we go back and look at our embedded dashboard, there is Americas, EMEA, and APJ, right? So there is, yeah, Americas, EMEA, APJ. Let's say I want to pass in Americas and EMEA, and let's say I want to pass that in as AMER-EMEA. I could do that, and for that I will put in a hyphen as the delimiter. That's not one of the values provided by default, but I can type that in. I can have multi-character delimiters as well. So for now, I'll just keep it as a single hyphen. And then match all value. What this is if I do not want to filter a field, I want to allow the user to see all the values from that column, what should be the tag value? Again, there is a default value you could pick as star, or you can type in your own. I'm going to type in all as the match all value here. You want to make sure that's a value that doesn't exist as a category value in your column. So be sure to check that when you're making that selection. So with that, let's go ahead and click add. And now we'll add one more. So from select column, let's select the product, and we'll repeat the same steps. So we'll call it, we'll name the tag as product tag, and then delimiter, we will use hyphen itself, match all will be all, and click add. So now both of these rules are added, but it's not applied yet. And it's called out in this message as well. There are unapplied changes to 2 rules. This doesn't quite affect readers yet. So let's click apply rules button here. And it asks us to confirm that this affects readers when the method is active. So go ahead and apply and activate. So now it says rows access is now secured with tag-based rules. You will also see that clear indication here that tag-based security is now on and applied. So even when this is collapsed, there is a clear indication that there are rules being applied within this block. So now let's go back to our private browser where we had that dashboard up earlier, and let's just refresh this and see what happens, right? Because we just applied the rules. We haven't done anything to allow the anonymous user access, right? So as expected, we get a message saying you don't have permission to access this data. It's completely restricted and I don't get to see anything. Right? Same will be the state of my dashboard too, because that's also driven by the same data set. So it applies to both of those dashboards. Now let's see how we can make this work from within the Lambda function. We will tweak that Lambda function. Let's shift back to Lambda tab, and therein we had opened multiple files. So flip back to lambda function.py and to the top of that function where we were making the API call, right? So in here, we want to add a small code block. So let me put this into chat. I put that code block into chat. I'm going to add that on line 20. After session lifetime in minutes, I'm going to put a comma and then paste that code block. Now, since we are using Python, the alignment of the code is important. Be sure that this is lining up with session lifetime in minutes and session tags, they are lining up correctly. And your code should look like this once this is done. There is a couple more lines we got to add. I'll paste that into chat as well. So this one, let's paste on line 11. I added a empty line and then I'm pasting this. Again, we go to align this. If it pastes funny, you can select the couple of lines like I have on my screen and just click tab so you can move the full block together rather than one at a time. So this could be whatever logic your parent application applies, right? Based on either region the user is coming from or whatever user or group properties as the parent application knows it. And you can have complex logic in there to decide on what tags to allow. I'm keeping it simple here. I'm just saying for any user that comes in, I want to show Americas and EMEA data, and I want to show two products, Alchemy and OneView. Okay, and we can see that that's being passed in here under session tags. There is this key value pairs, the region tag and product tag. This is what we configured on the dataset side, and these with the lowercase r and p are the ones which the variables with the value, right? So let's deploy this. The code changes that we made in Lambda, it's not saved, so be sure to click the deploy button and get the confirmation that the changes have been deployed. Now that done, let's flip back to our private window and just refresh that browser. Now we should see data for Americas and EMEA coming through. Let's see, something is not quite right at my end. Let me force this again. See what happens. Might have made a mistake in my region tag and product tag setting. So let me quickly check that. Or in fact, let me also change this to or instead. Let's make sure that the changes are deployed. And then go back here, refresh this. It's not quite liking that yet. Okay, let's go back here and I'll try turning off my, oh yeah, that no wonder I had made a change. I called this region key instead of tag. Yeah, I had made a typo somewhere. So let's do that. Sorry about that. Let me fix this. So I'm changing that to region tag and updating that. So region is region tag, product is product tag. Apply those rules, apply and activate. Flip back to my Lambda code. Let me paste in the earlier values. So added bonus, troubleshooting included in the live demo, right? So let's paste that in again and deploy. Let's make sure it's deployed. And go back and refresh this again. And this time I should see, yeah, as expected, I get a region for Americas and EMEA, and I get products Alchemy and OneView. These are the conditions I set within the Lambda code. So let's tweak that further. Let's say I want to show data for all products here, right? And just for two regions, I change product tag to all and leave the region tag at Americas EMEA itself. Deploy this, come back and refresh this, and I expect to see the same two regions, but all products. No data found for this visual. It's fun. Let's see. Let's make sure that this deployment is in fact sticking. And product tag. Let's refresh this again. Yep, so there was a slight delay there, but now you see the two regions as I requested for, and all the products as I allowed with that match all value of all. So if I change again here to America's EMEA, change that to all, deploy it, make sure, deploy it once more for good measure. Do that here. I should see data for all 3 regions and all products. So back to where I was initially, where I didn't have any rules. So match all of all and all on this is essentially getting me full access, or I could very well turn off the tag-based rules that I set on the data set as well. So if I come back to my data set and then turn this tag-based rule off, it asks me to confirm that added friction to ensure that you don't accidentally turn off RLS on a data set where it's critical to have RLS. So there is added friction to ensure that you don't trip up and make a mistake there. Type in confirm and click turn off. You'll see it's turned off, tag-based row level security disabled. And now if we go back and look at it here, essentially it will give us the same view because we were already on all and all. So it's giving us that view. Okay. And if ever you come back and turn this back on, your rules are not lost. So those will stay. Whatever you configured is not lost. If you turn this back on, those rules will get applied, right? So that's helpful. I can turn this off. Okay. And in fact, let me just quickly show I warned about the experience from the user-based mode earlier. So let me actually show you that experience as well. So if I have this tag-based rules turned on again, and if I go into that analysis and try to look at it, I will not see any data. Even though I created that analysis, I'm the owner of the data set, I do not have any user-based rules allowing me access to this data, and only tag-based rules have been set up. And I'm coming in through the console. There are no tag values set associated with my session. So that's why I get no data response here. So if you ever come to a screen like this, be sure to check the data set, look at the row level security rules, and see if you're having tag-based on or not. And if you have tag-based, then you have to add a user-based rule as well to allow admin users and authors access to that data. Okay, so for now, I'll just turn this off. And then if I go back to my analysis, I should be able to see data. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Hope this was good use of your time. Just to do a quick recap, we covered building up a framework, simple framework that lets you explore both the static and dynamic web flows, how to embed QuickSight. And we did that with minimal set of components, but you can use the same concept in your own environment, with your own web servers, be it in static or dynamic mode. So you can embed QuickSight anonymously, derive value from that, and then derive extended value by utilizing tag-based row-level security with those embedded dashboards. So hope this was good use of your time and you're able to put this to use in your production workloads. Have a nice day ahead. Thank you.